why you need a mono amp in your system. Okay, you don't need a mono amp. You need two mono amps. We have two ears and we listen in stereo. So two channels are the minimum for a proper listening experience. Oh dear, I've probably started a comment war already. What we're used to in recording and the majority of hi-fi are stereo amps, stereo preamps, stereo power amps, stereo integrated amps, stereo, stereo, stereo. And what I have here, the Fosi Audio ZA3, is a stereo amp. But it can be a mono amp as well. Then, of course, you'll need two. I'm going to start by telling you a few interesting snippets about the ZA3, then I'm going to test it, then I'm going to tell you how it sounds in practical terms, with none of that audiophile mumbo-jumbo. If I hear frequency response problems, I'll tell you. If I hear distortion problems, I'll tell you. If I hear noise problems, I'll tell you. But come on, this is the third decade of the 21st century, and all of these things, for practical purposes, should exist only in the past. Anyway, we'll see. Oh, I nearly forgot. The unboxing. That was fun, wasn't it? Short and sweet and not too much of that annoying music in the background. I'll play you some more of it at the end of this video. I'll be able to see from my YouTube statistics how quickly viewers click away. So let me start with the most distinguishing feature of this amplifier. It's designed to work either in stereo or in mono. I'll have to get technical, but it will be worth it. Before I start, I expect that there will be better technical experts than me in the comments. So if you, as an average viewer, do find a comment particularly enlightening, then could you please like it to help it rise to the top of the comments section to help other viewers. So how do we turn a stereo power amp into mono, and why would we do that? One way is bridge tied load, or BTL. Here's a diagram that I found from Marantz, giving them a bit of a plug there in exchange, and a link in the description. As you can see, the speaker is connected across the two red terminals. Simple as that, and flick the BTL switch. This increases the gain by 6 decibels, so louder. Louder is better, as we all know. But there's another way of doing this, which is parallel bridge tied load, or PBTL, which we find in the Fosi ZA3, according to Fosi Audio's website. There is some dispute about this on the internet, and you might find a rabbit hole to go down if you have quite some time to spare. But PBTL is what I see. This is where the two-channel outputs are connected in parallel. There's no extra gain, but there is a better ability to handle lower impedance loads. This is where experts might consider pausing to comment, or non-experts might take a quick round trip to Wikipedia for more detail. Link in the description. So, bearing this in mind, here's the big question. Why do audiophiles often prefer monoblock amplifiers? Monoblock is their fancy way of saying mono. Should I just say that if you want to do this in stereo with the Fosi ZA3, you'll need two of them? Yes, I know you know that, but I'm just making sure. Anyway, my researchers into audiophilia tell me that monoblocks provide isolation and separation. I'm not sure what the difference is, but there we go. Crosstalk in analog audio is definitely a thing, though. In well-designed equipment, it shouldn't be a problem. But why not separate the power amps and be sure? Also, your two mono blocks now each has its own power supply. That's the bit that converts the mains input into DC that the amps can use. It is a thing that the power supply of an amp can be the limiting factor in its performance. So I do see that giving each amp its own power supply has the potential to be a good thing. Now, one thing I can really get behind is that you can have each amp right there by the speaker. So your speaker cables can be fat and they can be short, as they should be. Of course, there's a point with speaker cables where you won't hear any difference, but short and fat is the right way to go. And often there's satisfaction in doing things the way you know is right. So, there we have it. And with a pair of Fosi ZA3 monoblocks, you have PBTL2. So you don't have to worry about those pesky frequencies where your speaker impedance is really low. Or at least, you can worry less. Now that we have PBTL theory, let's look at the other features of the ZA3. What might stand out to many are the balanced inputs on XLR sockets. You can use a tip ring sleeve jack too. Now, anyone involved in pro audio will be saying, why doesn't all equipment have XLR connectors? Whoever invented the XLR really did get things right, because it has stood the test of time, it's easy to solder, and there's very little to quibble about. Whoever invented the balanced connection was also a genius. Basically, instead of the circuit running around a conductor and a shield that's connected to ground, the signal runs around two conductors protected by a shield connected to ground. The signal doesn't touch the shield. The benefit is that any interference that gets into the conductors is cancelled out, which with long cable runs and especially anywhere around lighting dimmers is important. There's more to balanced connections than this, and experts might like to point out their favourite fun fact in the comments. I have one, which I may present in a future video, if no one beats me to it. The thing is, though, that with the short cable runs of the home recording studio, or home hi-fi, the benefit of a balanced connection isn't so much. I'll take it, though. And there are also unbalanced RCA input connectors for whoever prefers them. Also on the rear panel I see a sub-out RCA socket. Sub, of course, being subwoofer. I'm liking this being called sub-out rather than aux-out because it implies to me that it's controlled by the volume knob. And of course, you want your subwoofer to go up and down in level with your main speakers. Speaker outputs. Well, this is a compact unit, so they are a bit close together and fiddly. But you can use banana plugs in jurisdictions where they aren't illegal. There's another rabbit hole to go down if you have more time on your hands than you really should. As an audio enthusiast, it's natural for me to start with the back. But there's a front too. Switch for XLR or RCA, check, which means that you could switch between different sources, check, check. Switch for mono or stereo, checkity check. The volume control is, as you can see, orange for a more highly resolving sound. That's a joke. And to turn the unit on, you press it for a couple of seconds. You know, there's nothing like a separate power switch. I like to leave the volume control on my power amp always in the same place, if it even has one. So combining the power switch into the volume control either by turning it or pushing it is not my favourite. You might say this is a small thing, but remember when you're running a pair of monoblocks, you have two volume controls to line up. Just going round the back again for a moment, we find a socket called 12-volt trigger in. This is, as I understand it, a home cinema thing where you can turn on or off all of your equipment at once. It sounds like a good idea to me, but at present I have no way of testing it. Speaking of tests, it's time to test the Fosi Audio ZA3. I don't have much in the way of audio test equipment because it is, to do things properly, phenomenally expensive. I promise I'll get some when I receive my YouTube play button. Your subscription to my channel will help. See what I did there? Anyway, what I can test are the frequency response, power output in stereo and power output in mono. As the YouTubers say, let's get into it. So here's my setup, or should I call it a lash-up? Some of my cables are ridiculously stiff and I've had to tape them down to control them. The two goldy coloured things are 8 ohm dummy load resistors, each rated at 100 watts. And the notebook is there to prevent my desktop getting burnt. My source is a function generator, cheap and cheerful, but it works and I've linked it in the description. My oscilloscope is the keenly priced Funursi DSO-TC3 that I reviewed recently. It's a fun and useful gadget. I'm not going to say that I prefer it over my vintage Hameg cathode ray tube oscilloscope, but it looks better in photographs and also gives me handy digital readouts. I've linked that in the description too. I'm going to show you still images of the measurements rather than videos because otherwise the digits flicker a bit. So with the stills, you'll see my measurements in crystal clarity. The first thing I'm going to test is the frequency response. I'll test this at 1 kHz, then 20 Hz, then 20 kHz on my amateur test bench. Doing this on an oscilloscope is only ever going to be a quick test, so I'm not going to worry too much about small differences. So at 1 kHz I see an RMS voltage measurement of 19.85 volts. Fine. At 20 Hz, which the scope has interpreted as 0.02 kHz, I see 19.18 volts. Close enough. And at 20 kHz, 26 volts. What? I checked my function generator and it's flat. So I'll throw this over to comment experts. What do you think is going on? So far, so reasonably good. Now for the power output. Specifications for power amps are often somewhat optimistic. Fosi Audio says that with the 48-volt power supply, which I have, the ZA3 can deliver 155 watts per channel into a 4-ohm load. But the power supply can only deliver 5 amps. It says so on the bottom. That's 240 watts, which is nowhere near twice 155. Anyway, I'm going to test the ZA3 into an 8-ohm load. As we can see, clipping occurs at around 30 volts RMS, with both channels driven. Power is RMS voltage squared divided by resistance, so that's 112.5 watts per channel. That would be average power, but most people will call it RMS power. This agrees with the capability of the power supply. Oh yes, I did manage to burn myself a bit on one of the dummy load resistors. Now, what happens if we use this amp in its mono mode? Aha, around 32 volts RMS, a bit more, but really not much of a difference. But shouldn't there be more difference? 6 dB, which is a doubling of voltage. Oh no, we have to go back to that PBTL thing again. We shouldn't get any more volts, so we don't get any more power into a given load. But the load is shared between the channels, and we could get more power with a load of lower resistance. Or in the real world, the amp can cope better with loudspeakers that might have very low impedance at certain frequencies. Remember, when the impedance of a loudspeaker is specified, that's only the nominal figure, and it will be different at different frequencies. This probably should be a topic for a future video. Let's see the Fosi Audio ZA3 in use. Here's my alcove studio setup, where I create all of that irritating unboxing music. You can see my Fosi V3 in the centre, and also a pair of One Audio Monitor 60 headphones that I reviewed recently, links in the description. Oh, and the desk, a sit-stand FlexiSpot E7 Pro, with a maple top that I like very much. Link. You know where the link is. As for sound, despite that 20 kHz issue I commented on earlier, well, I certainly can't hear that. I have no problems with frequency response, audible distortion or audible noise, and the ZA3 goes louder than I can stand it. I'll put the specification on screen for your edification. The short story is that the Fosi Audio V3 is perfect for this kind of use and drives my vintage B&W monitors perfectly, and so does the ZA3. I don't really see any advantage in the ZA3 for this kind of use, so either would be fine. I think where the ZA3 will find its market is firstly for audio pros who want a handy amplifier for random tasks, and, as pros, who doesn't? And for audiophiles on a budget. You've envied those filthy rich audiophiles and their monoblocks for years. And now, for the much more reasonable price of a pair of ZA3s, you can have monoblocks too. I know I haven't covered every detail in this review, but I've covered the things that interest me. If I were in the market for a power amp at a reasonable price point, the Fosi Audio ZA3 would be on my shortlist. You'll find purchase links and any currently running discounts in the description. Fosi Audio sent me this amp to review, but other than that, there's no payment or sponsorship involved. So I can say what I like, and I've said it. See you soon.